Mic check.
Sounds good.
That's on or off? Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our working group to address concerns regarding the upkeep of veterans' graves. I'm Mike Frieda, North Haven's first selectman, co-chair of this task force and this committee. I'd like to welcome everybody and thank you very much for watching. I'd like to start from my right, your left, and have the committee members introduce themselves. Jamie?
Thank you, Chairman Frieda. Jamie Cosgrove, first selectman of the town of Branford.
Ron Shea, representing the Connecticut Cemeteries Association.
John Carmen, representing the Connecticut Funeral Directors Association, president of Carmen Funeral Homes and chairman of the Windsor Veterans Memorial Cemetery.
Maureen Magnan, Deputy Commissioner, Department of Consumer Protection.
Good afternoon, John Carragher with the State of Connecticut Department of Veterans Affairs.
And I think we have two of our colleagues on Zoom here. Representative Nolan, did I see you there?
Good morning, everyone. Glad to see you all.
And I think we have one other member. Jim, are you there?
Hi, this is Lori Matthew with the Connecticut Department of Public Health, and I'm sitting in for Jim Vanoy.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us, Lori.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask everyone if they had a chance to read the minutes, and if so, I would like to ask for a motion to accept those minutes. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any other discussion on the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Aye.
And MJ, thank you very much for compiling the minutes for us. So ladies and gentlemen, at the last meeting, we covered a lot of different topics. We're here searching for solutions to try to improve the condition of veterans' grave sites throughout the state of Connecticut in all cemeteries. One of the things that I found out since the last meeting is that there may be some confusion between purchasing a grave and perpetual care. So I'd like to pose the question. We have many experts here on this panel, and then I'd like to turn it over to them. I'll pose the first question. Is there a difference between purchasing a grave? Does it include perpetual care, or is that a separate add-on cost? I'd like to pose that question, and maybe John, I can turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Years ago, people purchased a grave and actually you're not purchasing the land, you're purchasing the right to use it for burial purposes subject to the rules of the cemetery. And they would oftentimes bill a family $5, $3 per grave that they owned every year. That became obviously an administrative nightmare. And I would say I've been a funeral director for 55 years. And in that time, anybody that purchased a grave, the endowed care, perpetual care was included in the price of the lot. So that basically those funds were invested and the interest was used to maintain not only that individual grave site or sites, but also the general roads and other areas of the cemetery. And not seen a change in that. And some cemeteries will set aside specifically, I know the Archdiocese does, and they delineate how much of that purchase price goes toward the endowed care. And others just include it, and it's often part of the deed that the people have.
Thank you, John. We'll go around the panel here. And Maureen, would you like to comment?
I don't have any input now. I'm just new here and I'm learning a lot already.
Very good. We'll come back to Ron and Jamie in a moment. John?
Sure. Thank you. And thanks, John. One of the things we were talking about is, something that we have to look at is the cemeteries that for all intents and purposes, there really is no ownership anymore. And that is that, the board or whatever organization established it is either no longer functioning or there's no members of the board left or whatever it is. So I think that's something that we need to look at as well.
Okay. Ron?
I would agree with John that in current practice, possibly maybe the last 100 years, that documents, which we would call a burial rights certificate, breaks out what's being paid for the right to bury the body as opposed to how much is being put aside as endowed care, perpetual care, whatever you'd like to call it. So I think in times long past, one would see, and one still sees monuments with the words perpetual care engraved in them, sometimes at raised lettering. And that would signify to the cemetery that someone has put money aside so that it will be maintained. Otherwise, the families had to come out themselves with a push mower or what have you. That's no longer the case. You know, the families are free to, if they want to do something above and beyond normal and routine care, they're free to do that. We hope they don't bring power equipment into the cemetery because then there's liability issues, safety issues. But for the most part, the cemetery puts that money aside in a professionally managed trust account, which throws off a certain amount of money every year. And those accounts are governed by federal statute, the Uniform Prudent Management of Institutional Funds Act, so that the corpus, the principal, is not touched for the remainder of the fund's life. Again, perpetuity is just the annual earnings. And if the fund is to be, again, conservatively invested in, they don't want things invested in Bitcoin or what have you, over time, probably the average return is going to be in the 3% range. Yes, today you could get 5% in a certificate deposit, but how long will that be good? So unless you want to invest in something that's really high risk and possibly high reward, but the prudent thing is to invest conservatively, and therefore the annual earnings would be modest, but one will hope it throws off enough income so that the cemetery could be maintained as far as mowing the lawn, mowing the grass, trimming around the tombstones, collecting the leaves, maintaining the roads, all those kinds of things that are routine and customary for a cemetery. But as John said, there's also the concern that not all cemeteries still have such funds, or were they invested properly in the earlier years? And I can't speak to that, but it certainly is a concern. The other thing that we talked about last meeting, and I think it relates to that point, is that the question of how many cemeteries are there in the state of Connecticut? And I'm not sure anyone has a really good hold on that, but in a really cursory examination, going out to the Find a Grave website, which is volunteer run for the most part. But if you Google cemeteries in Connecticut, you'll come up with a county by county list of those towns that have cemeteries and how many they think there are. And just looking at the New Haven County alone, they tally 289 individual cemeteries. That number is probably an underestimate, but if it's close, and if you extrapolate that to the 8 counties in Connecticut, we could be talking 2,000 or more cemeteries statewide. And how many of them are active? How many of them, currently have any endowed care funds, and how many have gone and defunct?
Yeah.
Going all the way back to the Revolutionary War time.
Thank you, Ron. Jamie?
On the topic of endowed care, true intent of this working committee, and I just paraphrase
I'm having a hard time hearing. I don't know if anyone else is.
regarding the upkeep.
You might.
All right, so just paraphrasing the act for this working group to develop a process to address concerns regarding the upkeep of veterans' graves. Now, from what you just heard, it's understood that endowed care is implied when somebody purchases a gravesite. I guess there's if a family member or has concerns, they feel that that care is inadequate or is not meeting, I guess, the standard of what would be typically considered normal under endowed care. What is the process now in terms of how is that addressed? And again, understanding that some, cemeteries are municipal owned, some are under the control of the archdiocese, 501c3s. I guess I ask, what do you see as in terms of the industry standard in terms of how they're addressed now today?
All right, we'll go to John first.
I believe, and I don't know when it was enacted, But some years ago, on a deed, it does have a contact person, or it's supposed to have a contact person if you have a complaint or a concern of where you would call, so that could be addressed.
All right, that's one option. John, anything on your side?
I honestly don't know. I don't particularly deal with the cemeteries outside of state control, but I think it's a great question in that what is the recourse for the, and not sure if these are correct terms, but I'm gonna say them anyways. What is the recourse for the purchaser that is not receiving the services that he or she thought that they contracted with the service provider? And I don't know the answer to that question. I think that's a big part of the question. Again, where does that person go when, no different than if you buy, if you have service if you have your car serviced from the local dealer, you go back to, obviously, to the dealer first, and then I think you go to motor vehicle if you have a problem with the service that is provided by that vendor.
Okay, Ron.
Actually, and again, I only have my own personal experience, but on our burial rights certificate, we don't list specifically a contact person. However, when the burial rights are fully paid and they receive the certificate, they always receive a cover letter with that contact information. So I've been there for 20 years now, so that's about how long that we've been doing it. I can't speak to previous management of the cemetery or other cemeteries for that matter.
So then if we turn to Maureen for a second, this is kind of a rhetorical question, Maureen. Is this something that the Department of Consumer Protection would be involved with? If there is not an upkeep, there is an implied thought process in the purchaser that there will be perpetual care. If they don't have a contact, is it something the Department of Consumer Protection would be involved with?
It's certainly something someone in state government could be involved with. I don't know if it would be us or, the Veterans Affairs Department, but we don't have any expertise in this field, so I'm not sure. We would have to build something from ground up that might be a little costly.
Yes, Ron.
Actually, we've been advised by legal counsel for the Archdiocese that the Consumer Protection does not have jurisdiction in such matters, nor does Veterans Affairs. The only state agency that does is the Department of Public Health at this point.
Lori, would you like to weigh in on that?
That's a good question. Thank you. I don't have any information toward that end, but I certainly can research that and bring it back to the group. And so I'm wondering, sir, I didn't catch your name. When you said that you believe that DPH has authority, what are you referring to?
I'm referring to advice of the legal counsel of the Archdiocese of Hartford, Cooney, Scully, and Dowling.
But what specifically? What are they referring to specifically that we have oversight of?
That actually the DPH is the only agency that, if you will, authorizes cemeteries or I won't say issues permits, but when there are matters such as expanding a cemetery or building a mausoleum, what have you, that they are the agency that would then opine on the legality of that.
So we have specific statutory responsibility as far as crematoriums. And there's a couple other statutory requirements that I could take a look at and provide to you all. I don't want to misquote anything, so.
And I can double check with our legal counsel to get a chapter and verse on that.
Now, that might be, after Lori does the research for us, that might be one method of resolution for those who are seeing their loved ones' veterans' graves not being kept, so to speak. So we have to take a look at that and see what Lori comes back with on that. Would anyone else like to comment on this particular part? Moving to possible other solutions, John came forward after the last meeting, and we found out that there has been a neglected cemetery account grant program from the state of Connecticut. And you were kind enough, John, to send us this information with different municipalities, I think.
I think that was.
That was John.
Yeah, that was me. And I did a little bit of research, and found this fund that is administered by OPM, Intergovernmental Policy and Planning Division. And the last time it was used was in 2023, Neglected Cemetery Account Grant Program Guidelines. Grants last awarded in 2023 to several municipalities. And what I could find on the website was grants were awarded in 2018, 2020, and 2023 for a grand total of little over $438,000 to, again, multiple municipalities. So I don't know. What I couldn't find, quite honestly, is were any municipalities turned down? I don't know if everyone that applied was awarded a grant, or if some municipalities were applied and did not receive the grant. And the second thing that I discovered was the statute, and that's 19A 308B, establishes the account, and it further states the account shall contain any monies required by law to be deposited in the account. I don't know what that means, and I don't know what the source of those funds might be. The overall point being, there is a mechanism, an existing mechanism, at least as of 2023, for municipalities to apply for a grant to pay for I won't say routine upkeep, but for heavy groundskeeping, et cetera, to bring those neglected cemeteries back to a state of reasonable repair.
So, John, I think that was excellent information you brought forward. So, for those watching on CTN TV, and Lori's here for the first time, there's two chief elected officials on this panel, Jamie Cosgrove from Brantford and myself from North Haven. So, if this grant program is still in effect for 2024, and we have a neglected cemetery in town that's not owned by our individual cities or towns, is it your interpretation, John, that the municipality can help a cemetery that they don't own?
I don't want to speak for OPM or for the deciding agency on awarding the grants, but my understanding of what I was able to read is yes. But again, it's not my program, and I don't want to say categorically yes, but it's my understanding that the answer is yes.
Okay. See, what we're trying to do, ladies and gentlemen, is identify solutions. And we have a lot of expertise on this panel with John, and Ron. And we have municipal experience here with Jamie and myself trying to solve this problem and make a recommendation to the General Assembly as to how we see this. So that my question would be, if that's the case and we can get these grants to help cemeteries even beyond the ones that we own in our cities and towns, would the other cemeteries be receptive? Ron, if I can turn to you, you've got a lot of experience with the Catholic cemeteries. How would that be viewed by the Catholic cemeteries?
Well, I want to back up to, again, the language in the act, and again, thank you, John, for that, which defines a neglected cemetery is one containing more than 6 places of interment and a burial ground or cemetery which has been neglected and allowed to grow up to weeds, briars, and bushes, or about which the fences have become broken, decayed, or dilapidated. So I don't think that would, it sounds to me like something that would refer to currently active cemetery, but more likely an abandoned or completely neglected cemetery where management has fallen apart, the board has fallen apart, and nothing at all is happening. It would look, and I haven't seen the application process, but I'm thinking that the municipality might have to file some kind of evidence that cemetery for which they're requesting state assistance has no management, has no activity, has no staff at all. Apparently, it would appear to me. So I don't think that any of our members who are all active cemeterians or archdiocesan or parish-owned operated cemeteries would meet these qualifications. And I think, regard to your earlier question, that I read somewhere language that said that yes, the municipality is held harmless, if for the work that they do.
And Mr. Chair, I've got it, and I can quote further from the statute. Subsection B of 19A 308 states it relieves municipalities, municipal employees and agents and officers of municipalities from criminal or civil liability for undertaking the care and maintenance of a neglected cemetery.
That's what I was remembering.
So let's just stay on this topic because it's a very important topic. If money's still out there, John mentioned it was $438,000, right, John?
That's the amount of money that was granted, that was provided in grants to municipalities in the last three grant cycles under this program. I couldn't determine the source of the funds that went into where these grants came from.
And it would appear from that table that in 2018, the standard grant was $2,500. In 2020, it was $3,332. And in 2023, it was $5,000. So that's the most that municipality can expect to get to address an issue.
Yeah, so Branford, I believe it was 2020 that we did receive, applied for, and received, I think it was a little over $3,300 for a small cemetery that we have that is truly abandoned in Branford. And our Parks and Recreation Department applies for that grant every few years and does just that, the major cutback of the brush, the weeds, cuts it down. And we do mowing of it throughout the year, yearly, but the major cutbacks, and it is limited in terms of awards, dollar amount. Following up on your comment, Selectman Frieda, about kind of we're looking for solutions to this issue and perhaps something that is given some consideration. We heard certainly the number of cemeteries. We could just imagine the number of graves for veterans throughout this state. I mean, to address what that we're looking to address in terms of just the general upkeep and the challenges. It's not just keeping the cemetery clear and mowed, but the grass as it begins to grow over the markers themselves. To address that would certainly be a pretty daunting task. And with understanding that money has been put aside historically for perpetual care, however, with the volatility in the markets and other reasons, cost, inflation, it puts a true burden on the investments keep up with the cost of the care. And perhaps there's an opportunity to look at expanding grant requests or available grant funds to if there was a project where we're addressing a number of these cemeteries where we're seeing the markers and they being lost just due to nature, not necessarily through neglect, in the sense that there's still may be active mowing going on, but you have a few thousand markers in a cemetery and the grass growing over them, now to begin a process or a project. We did hear last meeting that in terms of the stones and the monuments themselves, that there's opportunities through, I believe, the federal government to get those addressed. In terms of there's funding available, I believe, through an application through the Veterans Affairs. Is that correct, John?
That's correct. The municipality or other authorized agent can request a replacement stone from the federal VA for stones that are damaged or otherwise otherwise unserviceable. And that's at no cost to anyone, assuming that it was originally a marker provided by the VA.
And, I wonder how many municipalities or those who, care for the cemeteries are aware of that opportunity. So maybe it's even, doing some outreach or providing some outreach to make people aware, municipalities aware of what is currently available rather than creating something new.
So if we were to try to classify the cemeteries across the state of Connecticut, Ron came up with a number 289 cemeteries in New Haven County. If we were able to find out the total number of cemeteries, would the 4 classifications be the municipal cemeteries, the Catholic cemeteries, the neglected cemeteries, and the private cemeteries?
Sir, I don't think that would be right, only because neglected would be a state of repair as opposed to a state of existence. I think really a cemetery, regardless of who it is managed by, that is kind of irrelevant. A cemetery is a cemetery. And again, back on this grant program, at least 6 internments. It's not a cemetery in someone's backyard. But I think who owns it and who operates it is really kind of irrelevant. Yeah,
Okay,
John?
I think years ago, almost all cemeteries were taken care of by what was called ecclesiastical societies. They were not for profit. They were either owned by a church or a religious entity of some kind. And then many evolved to have a separate board, and they were incorporated as not-for-profit organizations. And they would have 8 or 10 people who would meet 1 or 2 times a year. They would manage the affairs of the cemeteries. And years ago, I served on one such board was called the Second School Society. And the funds were invested with then the Hartford National Bank. And we used to have to go and explain and make a detailed accounting of how all the funds were spent and used for the care and maintenance of the cemetery. And then we had to submit that to the probate court in the municipality. And somewhere along the line, all that ended. And we no longer had to have that oversight. And there's many cemeteries in the state that are operating under those conditions. Some of them very, very well. Some of them had wonderful investments. And then there's others that, they didn't sell very many graves anymore, or they didn't have that space. And they'd maybe had a few $100,000 that they had invested, and it was enough to be able to mow them and, maybe plow the snow in the winter. But there's still a lot of cemeteries that operate that way.
And the reason for that question, John, was I'm trying to determine if we are able to get 169 cities and towns to be aware of this municipal grant program. And we can do that, as past president of Connecticut Conference Municipality, we can get that word out. But then how would the municipalities know which cemeteries need the help without identifying who's responsible for each cemetery that are beyond our local jurisdiction? That's what I'm trying to figure out here.
Well, are these grants available to these other not-for-profit organizations? Or is it just the municipalities?
To the best of my understanding, it's just in municipalities. And just to go back on the grant program for 1 second, and because it's germane to what this working group is for, the grant program is for neglected cemeteries, not neglected veterans cemeteries. And that's an important distinction, especially when you consider that the majority of cemeteries do not have a specified veterans section. So those veterans graves are dispersed amongst the rest of the
Right.
the graves within the cemetery. But that's important because, you know, the tasking that we were given as a working group was focused on veterans graves. But as I think we talked about in our first meeting, that is almost impossible to do. It's just at the macro level, because again, there's no specified veteran section in most cemeteries.
Yes, Maureen.
Are cemeteries reflected on your grand list at any way either?
They are not.
No, they're excluded probably from.
Correct.
They are,
But
yes.
you don't like, have a list of your exempt properties or anything like that?
We do, and they're exempt, yes.
So they would be on that list. So towns should know what cemeteries they have. That's what I'm trying to
Yeah,
get to.
we would know. John?
Okay.
You don't know. So we're trying to get to the root problem here, which is, how do we make a recommendation to the General Assembly that covers all of the different problem areas? For those watching for the first time, we as municipalities, we have our own cemeteries, many of us. In North Haven, we have a contractor every year that we go out to bid that comes in and maintains the cemeteries. Any work that needs to be done in between the time that contractor comes in, we supplement that work with our Public Works Department. In North Haven, we have a Catholic cemetery that does a tremendous job in maintaining all of the graves through the Endowed Care program. Perhaps they've invested wisely, and maybe that's why they could do it. But what we're seeing is it's not the case in other parts of Connecticut. So we've come up so far with two possible recommendations based on what Lori comes back with. Using the Department of Health as a go-to agency for people that have problems and complaints. The municipal grant program, which John did a lot of research on here. But beyond that, how do we get to the neglected cemeteries? How do we help the other Catholic cemeteries who need help? That's kind of those questions. Those are issues that I don't think we have an answer for right now.
Well, I think going back to what was stated before, you know, back to the definition of neglected, the majority of cemeteries that are currently operating and are operating well wouldn't fall into that definition of neglected. Therefore, the municipality wouldn't have to help them. You know, they're operating the way that they operate and operate as the way they were intended to operate. The focus that the municipalities would probably want to be looking at are those ones where there is no organization that is taking care of those properties and those cemeteries. Am I kind of paraphrasing what you said before?
Yes, it's fairly accurate. There are, what is neglect? It means different things to different people. But I think that legislation seems to define it to a certain extent to being allowed to grow up to weeds, briars, and bushes, or the fences have become, themselves broken or decayed or dilapidated. So that seems to be the beginnings of a definition. But in the average person's mind who purchases burial rights, they may think differently. And I can't speak to what's inside of other people's opinions, but the language of the legislation seems to be, that they've been allowed to get completely out of control. Now, there are some, private cemeteries that have some management, some activity, but are very much, their maintenance is questionable or maybe not up to what other cemeteries would feel to be appropriate. And again, a matter of opinion.
Jamie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, we have a lot of discussion in this meeting and the last meeting regarding the term neglected. Now we're going back to the act, really what was spurred this whole issue being brought forward to the legislature was really the general upkeep of veterans' graves. So I think, when we continue to go on, like looking at and just trying to define neglect, and as Ron just pointed out, there's a beginnings of a definition there. And, but I think we have to bring this back. We're not really discussing or focus isn't on a neglected cemetery as it's really about the upkeep of a veteran's grave is really what spurred this to come forward. So, maybe it's, kind of focusing it more down on that discussion for a little bit to see if there's an opportunity to address the upkeep, which again, I'm sure at the end we'll hear from Mr. Zach, who brought this forward, but from my discussions with him, it was really the upkeep of the markers themselves and for the veterans.
All right, any other comments or observations? For those watching on CTN TV, this is our second meeting, and we will be continuing to meet over the course of the next several months to come to a conclusion and make recommendations to the General Assembly. If there are no other observations, we can open it up to public comment. But before we do that, anything else, Ron, Jamie?
I was just going to say that you're absolutely right that go back to the wording of the special act, and it talks about a way for people, for the families of deceased veterans who have concerns regarding the upkeep of such deceased veterans' graves. So now, what does upkeep mean? Here's another word we have to define. What is upkeep? And the original proposed Senate Bill 636 would have established a procedure for people to file complaints with consumer protection, and for consumer protection to create a department to do that, and for the Veterans Department to also have a for want of a better word, bureaucracy to govern those things. And the then commissioners of both departments found that language to be problematic. So I think this act was I'm not going to say a compromise, but was an effort to address the sense of that legislation, but without specifics. Unfortunately, that creates an open question.
Yep. John, Maureen, any other comments? Yep, we'll get to Lori. Okay, very good.
No, just taking this all in, it's a bit confusing, I guess, on how we determine where the veterans are. I don't know if the cemeteries keep track of who's a veteran, who isn't. And then I guess we're just going to rely on the family members to reach out, and other veterans' graves will remain neglected. So it remains, I think, something we need to really think about and work out.
You can't walk in any cemetery more than 10 feet without coming across a veteran's stone. I mean, they are everywhere. In private cemeteries, in, town-owned cemeteries, in these society-owned cemeteries. I mean, they're everywhere. I mean, going back to literally the Revolutionary War, especially in some of the old cemeteries. Since we first met, we had an anonymous call to our office say that a veteran stone in our veteran cemetery had been spray painted. In my 50 years of being involved in our veteran cemetery, this is the first time that anything like this has ever happened. And I had the park department and asked them to cover the stone until it could be taken out, removed, and we can apply for a new one. But just have never had anything like that. And the whole face of the stone was basically sprayed with black paint. So it's a little ironic to me that this happened literally as we joined in this committee and everything, but it's never like I've seen anything like that. So I'm hoping that it is obviously a very isolated instance and maybe more personal than it is someone just doing something to desecrate a stone.
Thank you, John, for that update. I'd like to ask Lori, do you have any comments, Lori?
Yes, sir, I do. I was just looking at the statute that mentions the Connecticut Department of Public Health. There are two. 19A 310, which is approval of vaults above ground. And then 19A 312, which is mausoleums. So those are the two that mention our department specifically. I just wanted to bring that up since I was looking those up. Share those with you.
Thank you, Lori. We're going to move to public comment now, and then I'll ask at the end of public comment for Representative Anthony Nolan, who's here with us on Zoom, if he'd like to share any comments and summarize. So if there are no other comments here, public comment, Mr. Ed Zach. Okay. And Mr. Zach, if you would press that, there you go.
First is, I got some handouts here for demonstrations. And I believe this is your first meeting, right? Okay, I gave this out in January's meeting and to help to clarify some of the things. And if you could just bear with me, okay, I'm trying to condense in 15 minutes of what has been occurring in the past 6 years, because all of you are very busy. So if I could just give this out first to show you the conditions of graves. Okay. Do I give this?
Bring it, yeah,
Or-
right to.
Okay, so these are the conditions of the graves. Okay, as I said in January, there is no criticism. Now, if I could share with all of you, oh, please, these are the veterans and the veterans' wives too. Okay, so no, you're correct, sir. It encompasses all people, and there's been quite a bit of research done, and I think there's some clarifications could to give you some help. This is the second handout. We need more time.
No.
I'm trying to to lead up to your questions. So if you would just bear with me, okay? And then I'll keep this short. This is a veterans who served in World War II. Please note that these veterans are common soldiers. They're privates, sergeants, corporals, technicians. Okay, these veterans have the record of their victories in the South Pacific. Now, this is dated in 1945. I try to bring documentation. So I have 40 years of financial experience in auditing, 20 years in Florida and 20 years in Connecticut. So I try to be careful what I say to be sure it's correct. Now, in 2003 or so, the remaining veterans are honored by the Major General the Kukno. Okay, if you just look at these people, there are just common people, and just think of the accomplishments they did. Now, if you go back to the last page, the Congresswoman DeLauro recognized these veterans, okay, and their accomplishments. Again, these are common people. Now, if you go to these photos, of this woman right here, she's in her Hades. And days before Memorial Day, she was using literally the kitchen scissors to cut around her markers, her husband's markers. And he was a Marine, private first class. Here's a veteran, just sitting there, okay, thinking. Now, these 6 photos here were taken on the Veterans Day of 2023. Okay, with the flags. This is at a perpetual care cemetery. I testified, and I'm telling you that, and I'm not trying to exaggerate or whatever. Believe me, I was told to bring in my parents' contract from 35 years ago, okay? Because the contracts are missing, okay? I went to DCP, to DPH, back and forth, and I commend that DCP and DPH. I'll get to the statutes, but in summary, Chapter 19, 368J, which was referred to. There is no state agency that has oversight of these statues. Okay, these statues are 30 years old. Okay, I went back and forth, and I compared DPH and TCP, great people, but they do not have the powers. Okay, this is what I'm getting at. Contracts are missing, buried, no, the market's covered with weeds. There is no criticism, okay, but it's not right. Well, in a couple months, Memorial Day is going to come. Okay, I testified on February 7th, 2023, and said to the Veterans Committee, if there is no legislation, this will continue. Okay, and it will continue. And just think of the Major General Kukno and Congressman DeLauro, the one that we're told that these veterans from World War II, their markers are now covered with weeds. Okay, these are Connecticut veterans. They were not pleased. And I commend Selectman Frida for being very proactive in North Haven, and First Selectman Cosgrove was at a perpetual care cemetery with his friends, digging up or trimming weeds from veterans. He is to be commended. Okay, and just take him. I don't want to take up your time more. Just please take him. No moment when you have a chance, to read this in detail. But I'm just trying to give you a broad outline. Okay, and there has to be something done. And I've been saying from the start, give these people a voice. Okay, that's all. There is no voice right now. There isn't, because these statutes do not apply. And I was told by a very competent attorney that works for the state, who did a great job doing our research. These statutes aren't functional. And Mr. Co-Chair, you brought up the probate. I spoke to probate too. They don't pay attention to them. Okay. Now, if I could share with it. First is that these are the statutes right here that were discussed. And I was told again that there is no one in charge of these statutes. These statutes are 30 years old, and it appears this is the first time in 30 years that these have been this has been discussed. Okay, now if I could go through this, and if you could just go to the first photo. These are the accomplishments of the veterans, okay, who are now covered with weeds. And, here's the photo of them in, 1945. Okay, now, sir, the second one is a letter, which I think is very helpful, which proves the documentation that there's no one to go to. This woman went to the military affairs. They said that, Veteran Affairs, I'm sorry. They said that they can't do nothing about it. This is a need for a voice. Okay, really, not to give you help, that's all it is. Okay, if you go to the following one, this is a letter from Branford's Town Council, 30 members, and they signed it in support of a bill for the veterans. Okay, to support Senator Cohen. This is a letter, the following one is a letter dated 2021 that was sent to me. I just got it in the mail. I don't know by who, but it says here, there's a very good quote here by Ben Franklin, who said, to know the character of a community, I need only to visit its cemeteries. Now, to me, this is going to be then if you could go to the following one, it's a financial fiscal impact. Now, based on the meeting in February of 2023, chaired by Senator Marks and Senator Nolan, who are fantastic and are very supportive. They are required to send it to a separate department to determine the state impact and town impact. Okay. Any bill that this group decides, it's the financial implications could stop the legislation. That's reality. Okay, this is why the thought is to start off with a voice. Okay, I pick up the phone. I got a concern. Okay, then place a call. I've observed that other conversations are being about families. There are thousands of veterans in non-veterans who no longer have families. Who's to speak to for them? These are the results. Okay, there is no voice. Okay, the chair, just please keep in mind the fiscal impact, because it has to be voted on by the Veterans Committee, and then if it doesn't pass a committee, it's gone.
So, Mr. Zach, if I can ask you this question after listening very carefully to how you described this, you're implying, it seems like, that the first step for us is to create a voice for those. And that would mean, after having you outline what your interpretation of the current statutes are, that perhaps one of the recommendations of this panel is to try to put more strength to those statutes for the Department of Health and the Department of Consumer Protection to give the people a voice.
Okay, correct. Okay, but I'm not trying to pass the buck or whatever. I'm just a common person. Believe me, I believe this DPH told me it belongs with DCP. DCP told me it belongs with DPH. really. There was no criticism. They are great people. TCP is great, that they want to help, but they do not have the statutes to do it. They want to help, but they can't do it.
Understood.
That's to your question. And then, there was discussions of the $5,000 contract. If you go to the following one, this is a press release by the governor of the towns that received it. Surprisingly, there is only about 50 towns out of 169 towns. The first selectman, Cosgrove, you mentioned that Branford has been getting it, but for your attention, because you're busy, I don't see Branford on here.
Through your Chair, in 2020, we received, Branford received it.
Yeah.
In 2020, we received the 3,300. We
Yeah.
did not apply the last time.
Okay,
Yes.
gotta bring it to your attention, that's all. Okay, now, Mr. Shea brought up the legislation. If you could go to this one, this was proposed in 1994. This is excellent. Okay, this is how it should be done. Quite frankly, based on research, the lobbyists got to it. Okay, this is why I'm suggesting, or just a thought, is to start off with a voice. Okay, this is a statewide issue. This is the legislation that was proposed. It's great, but it will not pass 10-1 because of the financial impact. Okay. And then the final document is this one here. And there is a story here too in the register of it. This was filed with TCP. There were two filings there, and there's over 250 photos between both filings of markers covered with weeds. Okay, and again, Memorial Day is coming, and I stand by my statement that without legislation, this will continue. And I firmly believe, and I stand by this too, that there's no person that deserves to be treated this way. Okay, we're talking about 35 seconds to trim each marker. I do 20 a year because if I don't do it, it won't get done. Okay, and it should be done. 35 seconds. I'm sorry, I got a problem with that. Just to get these veterans a flag 2 times a year, and then their wives, and then people without that aren't veterans. That's all it is. And I showed to you the woman with scissors, kitchen singers, scissors, trimming her husband's marker. I saw it. I stopped and I said, "Could I help you?" Yeah, I did it in 30 seconds.
Mr. Zach, before you conclude, let me ask you this, after listening to the second part of how you described this. If this group was able to make a recommendation to enact legislative change to give more strength to either one of these departments to create the voice, and we were able to, let's say, Mr. Cosgrove and I, to ensure that every municipality knew there was this grant program and would apply, would you view that as a success of this panel?
200%, Mr. Chair. 200%. That's it. There's one more thing too. I commend former Commissioner Seago in her testimony. She said in her testimony that she had reservations, and that's correct. But she also said that it should be for all markers, okay, not just veterans, okay? And again, 35 seconds, okay? That's all it takes. And to give you help too, is that I'm deferring you to you, ma'am, and please don't take it wrong, is that at the February 6th, the February 7th meeting, the commissioners have a opportunity to voice their opinions of a proposed statute. Okay, you have a tremendous weight. What's going to be passed or not? That's fact. This is why I said, I keep on saying, keep it something simple, something affordable. That's all, so that it will pass, because with the help of DCP and DPH and the great people of the Veterans Committee and Representative Nolan and Senator Marks, it will pass. Okay, I am positive on that, but I'm disappointed. It took 6 months for us to get the first meeting. So we're 6 months behind. And it's doubtful that there's going to be legislation this session. So therefore, there's a good possibility this will continue. I was driving by to see a doctor in Guilford, and I saw a cemetery in Guilford. I said, I'll drive by. And Senator Cohen's hometown, there's markers covered with weeds. Okay. Okay. Do you have any questions or anything?
No, I think I'll ask the panel members in a moment, but I think you've created a couple of different pathways for us to consider that might be able to fast track this committee's recommendations.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Okay, and just one more thought, to commend your co-chair, sir, for bringing up the people who no longer have families. That's very important.
All right, we'll ask, any comments, John? Maureen?
No, I just want to say thank you for coming and thank you for your dedication to this issue. And I hope that as a state, we can figure out a solution.
Please, okay, I beg you. Okay. Thank you. again.
I too want to thank you. You've just worked on this for so long, and all of this material, I mean, it shows not only your dedication, but your respect for the veterans. And for that, we thank you.
Yep. Thank you, sir. Just keep in mind, the people that did this, these are teenagers, and they're 20 years old. And then they're like this, no, I'm sorry.
All right, I'm going to ask Ron and Jamie and Lori if they have any comments. Ron,
Nothing at this time.
Jamie?
No, not at the time. Just once again, thanks for providing the information. We'll review it and we'll be back next
Okay,
month.
and then both of you to bring it back to your respective councils is perfect.
We'll take care of that, Ed. Now, Lori, any comments, any questions for Mr. Zach?
No, thank you, Mr. Zach. I appreciate your input and would love to see your information when we could
Sure.
actually see it. Appreciate your comments and information. Thank you.
Before I turn it over to Representative Nolan, after Mr. Zach has identified two pathways, which he thinks would be really a great step forward. He used the phrase 200%. We might want to consider, I'm not sure if we can get it done, but if it's two pathways, one we can take care of, Mr. Cosgrove and I, getting the municipalities to understand that this grant's out there. But if this group was able to make a legislative recommendation to the General Assembly to give more strength to, let's say, the Department of Health or the Department of Consumer Protection to create that voice that Mr. Zach just mentioned, that might be the role of this group. If everyone can consider that before the next meeting.
Just one more thing. I apologize. I forgot. I was talking to several people, and there's a terminology called shelving. And I spoke with attorneys too, and I commend this whole group to take your time because you're busy. But there are reports in the past from working groups that were shelved. Okay, I was told this, and the people that served on working groups too, they said they were shelved. With you behind Representative Nolan and Senator Marks and DCP and DPH, 200% it will get done. Just be together. Okay, that's all I ask.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Zach.
Okay.
And Representative Nolan, would you like to offer some comments and summarize?
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate everybody coming together. As I said earlier, I do think it's going to be necessary for us to look into the neglected cemetery account grant as a legislature, because I believe that it was a discretionary program. And the last time I think John talked about the last time it was used was 2023. But that program might need some additional funding in it to ensure that it continues. So that is something to take a look at. So hopefully we can get some language for some legislation to ensure that there's funding available for it sooner than later. Thank you, Mr. Zach, for all your information that you continually give. It is greatly appreciated. Your passion is noted, and we will continue to fight as much as we can to bring, things that we need into fruition. You have a lot of expertise in this work group, and I'm confident that some suggestions will come up and will be any kind of change for legislation, and we will try and take care of that. Many legislators are supportive, and we just want to make sure that our veterans are honored and their graves are taken care of. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Nolan. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'd like to thank our panel members here. We'll look forward to the next meeting. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second. All those in favor?
Mhm.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.